Welcome, friends, to another interesting topic for today, that is studio system in Hollywood. Now, what do you understand by the term studio system? So, first of all, let me take you uh, to the great studios in Hollywood. What are they? I'm sure many of you are familiar with that, and some of these great studios still exist even today. Warner Brothers, MGM, RKO, Paramount, Columbia. Those were the great studios that shaped Hollywood film industry. It is instructive to note that these were not just studios that produced films, but each studio had a system of its own. We have to remember that the studio system especially in the old Hollywood period, the golden era or years of Hollywood, was a very well-oiled machinery, and one of its tasks was to regularly produce films as well as regularly churn out stars. So star machinery, it was a very integral part of the studio system. Stars were important. They may no longer be today. It may, today things have changed a lot, and we started feeling the winds of change from the 60s onwards. But that's something that we are gradually moving towards. We have to understand how it all began. So, stars were important, and a machinery was important to churn out films as well as stars at frequent regularity. One reason for the enormous popularity of films was the existence and presence of stars. People went to movies to watch their favorite stars, and therefore studio machinery worked hard to create stars, build up stars, and to work out their images, and also to maintain those carefully cultivated images. So that is important. Hollywood lore is full of such incidents and anecdotes where ordinary people were turned into stars through the great machinery, the studio machinery, and their images were constructed, and that was a part of the studio PR. So it was important that these actors and actresses, they should be built up, and their images should be created, cultivated, and maintained. Any dent to these images was considered detrimental to the existence of the star as well as to the system. So, stars were called matinee idols. That's the term that the studios and media use for them. They had specific images that were lapped up by the worshipping public. So, we had people such as John Barrymore, Douglas Fairbanks, who were these actors were known for their swashbuckling persona. We had Rudolph Valentino, the ultimate screen lover, especially during the silent era, and Mary Pickford. Mary Pickford, many of you would be familiar with. She has starred in a couple of films with Charlie Chaplin. We also had Norma Shearer, Gloria Swanson, and Greta Garbo. Those were the ultimate stars of the silent period, of the silent era. Some of them, of course, also went on to work when movies went talkies. Stars were the most precious commodities for a studio. Someone who would lure the public inside the film theaters. Stars sold the pictures. This is also a case very true with our Indian film industry. Okay. In Hollywood, things have changed. Stars no longer are used to lure the public inside the film theaters. Consider a movie like Jaws, or even more recently, films such as Avatar. Okay, so we don't have stars. The Hollywood doesn't need stars, at least so regularly as our films do. And when I say as our films do, we have to, of course, look at the larger context, and I'm not talking about the avant-garde or more experimental films that are made in our country. By and large, we live in a star-driven system, just like the old Hollywood system, the studio system. This was also a period when magnum opuses and high-cost films were very often commercially and critically successful. For example, Irving Thalberg, who was associated with MGM, his Mutiny on the Bounty, Camille, and Gone with the Wind were some of the major blockbusters of the 30s. Now, MGM was managed by the great Louis B. Mayer, with Irving Thalberg as the production manager. Along with David O. Selznick, they created some of the greatest films of all time, such as Gone with the Wind, Rebecca, and Duel in the Sun. MGM studio was basically, essentially very proud of its tagline, more stars than there are in heaven. They were the most prosperous and most prolific studio at one point and had most of the biggest directors and stars under contract. Some of the greatest MGM films of this period are Anna Christie, Grand Hotel, Camille, Goodbye Mr. Chips, The Wizard of Oz, and Gone with the Wind, which is also considered the national ultimate and national epic of America. David O. Selznick was also the most influential producer of this period, having made films such as Gone with the Wind and Rebecca, Spellbound, and also A Star is Born. Here is a clipping from the great Gone with the Wind. Please do watch it. Paramount was another great studio of that time. It was founded in 1916 and progressed under Adolf Zucker. The studio was very European in its approach, and most of the directors and technicians had come from Germany, having fled the Nazi regime. Some of the early successes of this studio included Rudolph Valentino's The Sheikh, that is 1921, and Blood and Sand in 1922. Another other set of great movies that came out of Paramount Studio were Joseph von Sternberg's Morocco, Shanghai, The Devil is a Woman, and all these films with Marlene Dietrich, Marx Brothers comedies such as Animal Crackers, Monkey Business, Duck Soup, and Ernest Lubitsch's musical comedies and comedy of manners such as Monte Carlo and Ninochka. Many of these films starred Greta Garbo. Warner Brothers was another great studio of this time. It was a family-run studio with Jack Warner as the in charge of production. Warner Brothers imposed a strict code of production efficiency on its directors, technicians, and actors. And interestingly, the directors were expected to produce at least 5 pictures a year. The studio made fast-paced narratives, and some of the most famous films of this period made by the studio belong to the gangster genre. We have been talking about gangster genre through this course, and also its characteristic semiotic features. So you may recall all those features and apply to some of the greatest films of this genre made by this studio, such as Little Caesar, The Public Enemy, I Am a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. The studio had a great lineup of directors including Max Reinhardt, Michael Curtis, Marvin Leroy, and others. The studio also has the distinction of producing the first talking picture, The Jazz Singer. Now, I am aware that many of you you have been contacting me for giving you the names and spellings of these great directors. I would suggest that you do a little research of your own. If you go to and look up great directors associated with Warner Brothers, many of these names would come. Paramount, MGM, many of these names would occur. 20th Century Fox was established by Daryl F. Zanuck, a great studio still in existence, and Daryl F. Zanuck was the vice president of the studio. The studio's early successes included What Price Glory and F.W. Murnau's Sunrise, which I frequently keep referring to in this course. One of the studio's important directors was John Ford, who made Young Mr. Lincoln, The Grapes of Wrath, and How Green Was My Valley. Here is a clipping from Sunrise, Murnau's Sunrise. Please watch it and understand the binaries between city and the rural that I keep talking about. Post-war, Fox focused on making realistic films, films that were often gritty. In 1930s, however, there was a shift, and Shirley Temple, the lovable child star, became the most bankable star, and later Will Rogers became their star performer. From 50s onwards, the studio employed stars such as Marlon Brando, Marilyn Monroe, and Jane Russell. Columbia Pictures was founded by Henry Cohn. For the most part of the 1930s, Columbia supplied the bigger studios with low-budget features for double bills. Double bills, a kind of a screening of a smaller film alongside a major picture. So in order to draw in a larger number of audience, or even to fill in time, you had to give offer a double bill of sorts. So Columbia Pictures supplied the double bills very often, which was low budget. They had very few stars under their contract and had modest production values, unlike MGM. Columbia occasionally invited successful directors from other studios to make a picture for them. Two such examples were Only Angels Have Wings and His Girl Friday, both directed by the great Howard Hawks. For a long time, the studio's major author was Frank Capra, a Sicilian immigrant and Columbia's star director. Capra believed that movies are fantasies of goodwill. After his early comedies, he settled down in the role of an American preacher. So his movies are known for their moral didacticism. His films are extremely utopian, quite sentimental, and critics have accused him of being extremely populist, trying to reinforce traditional values with very cozy brand of optimism, the typical feel-good cinema that many of us are critical about. His films and heroes are typically simple, and the word that is often used in connection with Capra's heroes is folksy, Folksy, very folksy, small town country boy kind of a person with simple values. And this kind of hero overcoming corrupt city sophisticates and politicians. Film historians consider his films as morally trite, and if you watch these films today, they look terribly out of date and out of time. The studio's major films are It Happened One Night, Mr. Deed Goes to Town, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, Meet John Doe. So these are Frank Capra films, and It's a Wonderful Life. Of course, this is a terrific film starring James Stewart, a very popular Christmas film because the narrative, the story takes place on a Christmas Eve. Interestingly, Capra was commissioned by the US Army Chief of Staff to make a 7-part documentary series called Why We Fight. Why was Capra commissioned to do that? Because by then he had acquired the image of being an American moralist. So who better than Capra to make a film about why we fight, which is again a very utopian, idealist and sentimental kind of take on war. Here is a scene from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington starring James Stewart. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the scene, and we'll meet for our next class.